Hey buddies! So LaTeX is a text editor, which basically means it takes your text and makes it look all fancy. The main platform beginners use is Overleaf, which is a cloud-based platform. This means you can work on any device and you'll be able to access your documents. To get started, it's pretty simple. You can just log in with Google, assuming you have a Gmail. And as soon as you do, you can see all of your past projects here. Here it shows the name of the project, who originally created it, and the last time it was modified. To create a new project, you simply new project, and you can choose any of these. They give you some basic templates, so you can look at each of them to see if it's something that you like. But I'm going to start from scratch with a blank project, and we'll name it tutorial. Create. And so, nice, we have a document now. And you'll notice there are three main regions to our website. On the left, we have this sidebar, which contains all of our files. And whenever you want to upload something new here, you just press upload, and let's say we want an image. So I'll import a buddy. And so now we see we have the image here. Typically, a good practice is to create an images folder that you can put all of your files into. That way things don't get cluttered. Now, let's look at the actual code over here. And you see, as soon as we made it, we have some example code set up for us that gets our document started. Most of it you can ignore, and it kind of depends on what package you're using, what kind of template you're working with. This code is going to differ. The main thing we need to worry about is these three here correspond to these three here. So if you want to change what it says, you can just change it here. So the author is Buds, for example, and you'll see whenever I want to see a change, I press recompile, and it's going to update my document over here. So on the right hand side, we can actually view the document, and we can zoom in or zoom out to make it easier to view our PDF. So over here, we have this tag right here, begin. And so basically, begin is always going to have a end following it. And so all this is saying right here is, hey, here we're going to begin the document, and here we're going to end it. So everything we want in our document is going to be between these two. For example, like the title and this section, introduction. And we can do begin and end for a bunch of things. So as soon as I type begin, itemize, for example, if I just hit enter, it'll automatically do the end for me. So that's a pretty neat trick. And if you don't like the format in here, you can always look at a template and just copy paste the code from there. For example, I can just type overleaf templates, and it's like first thing that shows up. They have a bunch of templates here, and I could do LaTeX templates. It also gives me a bunch of templates. You can go through, find whichever one you like the most. I personally found my own template that I really like, so whenever I want to use it, I just go to an old project that has it and copy paste the code here, right before the section. And let me go back. And we have the begin document, so make sure you have an end document at the end. Oops, typo. Recompile, and you can see afterwards it definitely looks different. I like this a lot more. Again, most of it is just random code that you don't really have to worry about. So yeah, let me change name to, the title is now LaTeX tutorial, and the date is January 2024. And there, it's updated. So I want to show you guys how to work with the actual text, okay? Because that's kind of the whole point of this is let's work with text. So for text, there's some interesting things. First of all, if I start typing stuff here, like, hello, this is example code, you'll see it just prints it immediately after. Okay, let me zoom in. And if I were to make a new line and I were to type, here's the second line, we'll see that it just makes another line underneath. And there's two things to note here. One, no matter how many enters we do here, it's not going to change how it displays because the code doesn't really care about this. If you want to add space in between two different lines, one thing you can do is you can do 2 backslashes, or maybe those are, backslashes. And you're going to see that's going to put a space there. Now, personally, I do not like this. I really hate people that do that. But the way I prefer to create new spaces is get rid of that junk. We can use these tags: small skip, mid skip, big skip. And those will basically add spaces in between two lines. And you can actually use these to control the space in between lines, like here's line 1. Here is what a medium skip looks like. And here is a big skip. And so you can see here, small skip is pretty small, medium skip is medium, and big is big. And this really allows you to control your space in between lines, because if you want an even bigger skip, you can just do big skip again. And so this is how I space my text. And the second thing we notice is it's always indented, right? After this section, it's not indented. So that's a really weird thing about sections. The very first line is not indented, but everything afterwards is indented. So how do we fix that? Well, right before your line, so let's say we don't want this last line to be indented. Right before it, we're going to do a backslash, no indent. And check it out, it's no longer indented. Yay. For our text, you can Okay, so let's talk a bit more about the actual text. First of all, we want to be able to emphasize specific words. And so to add emphasis, we can bold things. So you can either just highlight text and do Control B to bold, as we can see here. Or you can just, when you're typing, let's say we want to make something fancy by putting it in italics. So I'm going to do Control I, and I'm going to put fancy. And we see bold and italics. And you can work these together. For example, I can put my italics inside of my bold. And see, now it's bold and italicized because it's within the bold. See? And it's within the italics. So that's one way to do emphasis. Another thing that's really fun is to color code your text. But to do that, you need a specific X color package. So you need to do this line. You need to include it right here. Use package. Basically, we're using something that someone else made. We're going to use X color because it gives color to our text. And when we do that, now whenever we want color text, we can just do text color. And you'll see we put the color we want here, so like red, and the text that we want colored, like OMG, colors are so fun. Oh, so. And as you can see now, it is colored here. And for all of the text we've been doing, it's all been in what line? But what if we make our text really, really long, causing it to go onto a separate line? What we see is it automatically wraps for us. Now let's move on to images. So as I said before, you can upload an image, and if you want to display it, there's two ways you can do it. The first is you can put it inside a figure. And when you do that, it automatically does all the things for you. It centers it. Inside here, include graphics, you're going to include what you want. And the caption is what you're going to put as the caption. So it's going to be a nice picture. And now you can see, hey, we have a nice picture here. And we have our caption automatically. I don't really like this for two reasons. One, trying to position the figure on your text gets really weird. For example, here I have all of my text from before, and afterwards I'm trying to put my figure here. So what you would expect is first all the text and then the picture. But what do we have on this side? As you can see, it puts the picture first and then all of the text below. And when I tried to include a second figure, instead of like doing figure and then figure, two pictures on top of each other, it did it over here on its own page. So I personally do not like using figures because it makes orienting those pictures very difficult. Instead, we can just manually orient the pictures by doing begin center. So now everything we do is going to be in the center. We're going to include graphics where we can put our image there. Inside these brackets, that's for controlling the size of your picture. So for example, now we see we have the text and then the picture below. And what if this picture is too big? What if I want to make it smaller? Well, I can adjust the width. And so I can make the width, let's say 0.1 text width. So basically, the text occupies this much space. I can control the width of my image so it only occupies some fraction of that space. As you can see, once we do that, now we have a small picture that takes up 1/10 of the width. And so you can use this to control the size and scaling of your image very easily. But we don't have any captions for this, and that's kind of a bummer. But we can just add the captions automatically by doing enter. And on our new line, we can just say, hey, I'm going to say figure 1, and then a nice picture. And what we would expect is it just displays the text right underneath it. So this is how I deal with images. Finally, let's talk about math. So for math, you might normally think, hey, I can just type out my math equation like 3x plus 4y equals 7. And when we do it, we see, hey, it works just fine. But what if we wanted to do something like an integral or something else that requires specific math symbols that you wouldn't find on a keyboard? This doesn't really help. So what I suggest is anytime you want to work with math, put $signs. The math is in the money. So inside here, let's try doing the same thing. 4x plus 5. No. Okay, sure. 4x plus 5y equals 7. And you can see it looks slightly different. First of all, it spaces things nicely and the letters are now in italics. Sometimes if you don't want things to be in italics like this, you can do something special by doing /text. And now anything in here becomes regular text. So what if I want to say 4x plus 5 babies equals 7? Now, look, it looks all nice and normal. If we didn't include the text, what would happen is it would be the weird italics font. And that doesn't really look as nice. So that's one thing we can do with math. Second of all, we can include so many math symbols. For example, all of our Greek things like alpha, beta, gamma. It displays all of them here. So you see, whenever you want to include something fancy, you need this symbol, and then you do the fancy stuff. Second of all, we can do superscripts and subscripts. So to do a superscript, like 2 cubed equals 8. You want to do that caret symbol. The caret says, hey, we're going to put things up here, okay? But what if I wanted to do something like 2 to the 32 equals 8? Now you may think this works, but when we recompile, you can see, oh, that's not right. The 2 is down here, it's not up here. So if we want to put something big in our superscript, enclose it in brackets like this. If we put curly braces on both sides, then it knows, hey, this caret symbol applies to all of this. And so we could actually make it as big as we want, and you would see that it still puts everything in the exponent. So that's one important thing to keep in mind. Now, for subscripts, it's the same thing, except doing a caret, we do this, the little down sign. So like 2 sub 2, we could say. Or actually, let's do something more mathy, like if we were naming a variable, like alpha 2. Or alpha sub n. You can see it's doing everything like that. But if we want something bigger, again, we need to put it in brackets, like alpha sub neat. Now it's all down here. If we didn't do that, again, it would only take that first character as the subscript and do the rest normally, which is not what we want. So that is how we do math. But sometimes we want to emphasize our math. We want it to be on its own line, center of the page. For example, like if we're defining a function. So if you want to emphasize your math, it's not just one monies, it's 2 monies. And now we can do our thing here. For example, f of x equals x to the 4th plus 5x squared minus alpha x plus 4. And notice here it looks fine, but I made a big, huge mistake right here. So whenever we do the fancy math symbol, it's going to make it a different color. So we know, hey, this is fancy. But notice when we put the x immediately after, I tried to do alpha x, but instead it came out as alphax, which if we compile, it's not going to display anything because it doesn't understand what that is. And it even gives us the red underline. So make sure when you're including these fancy stuff next to letters, you want to put that space there. So it understands, hey, these are 2 separate things. And that's what we see. X to the 4th plus 5x squared minus alpha x plus 4. And so that's pretty much everything you need to know about LaTeX, at least for beginners. One last thing I want to mention is organizing stuff neatly. Like if you have a ton of stuff you have in your document, you don't just want straight up text. You want to split up into sections and maybe even include a table of contents for your section. So for table of contents, it's literally just / table of contents, wherever you want to put it. For our sections, however, we're going to use / section to indicate a section. And if I wanted to do a second one, so like section examples, I would just do it like that. As we can see here. But sometimes we want to split our section into more sections. For example, in this first segment of our tutorial, we talked about text. So I want to do subsection text. And now we can see, hey, under section 2, we have section 2.1, which is all about text. And then afterwards, we had a subsection on pictures. So I can do subsection images and subsection math. And we can see here it's making our subsections for us. And we can split things up even more by just doing subsection. For example, text, first we did spacing. So I could make a subsection all about spacing. And then later we had the subsection about display, like making it bold or italics or colored. And so you can see here it makes subsections. And every time we make a new section, you can see, going back to our table of contents, it updates. And this is really cool because now whenever we click, we go somewhere. We go directly to where it is in our document. So that's really neat. Oh, something I forgot to mention that you may end up using is bullet points. So let's create a subsection for lists. So to start a list, we're going to use our begin tag, and we're going to itemize. And we're creating a list with a bunch of items. For example, if we had a groceries list, it could have apples and oranges and pineapples. And so basically what we see is each time we want a new bullet point, we're going to do /item. And keep in mind, within this, everything works as normal. All the other stuff we learned still applies within these bullet points. If I want to make a new line, I can just do that and say, hey, this is a new line. And when we refresh, we can see, hey, in our bullet point, we made a new line. And if we want spacing and stuff like that, we can use big skip. And we can include images in these bullet points. Basically, everything is exactly like what we learned, except now it's all contained in this bullet. And we can even give our bullet points bullets. For example, within our oranges, we want to specify the type. So we could do a begin itemize. And now we can have like red oranges or fluffy oranges. And so we see that within, actually it's kind of hard to see, but within this bullet point, we now have a new list within it. Okay, that's nice. But what if we don't want bullet points? What if we want to enumerate, like 1, 2, 3? Well, it's the same idea, except instead of itemize, because we're not putting items, we can just enumerate. And so end enumerate. And you can see this becomes a 1, 2, 3. Pretty simple. You can also do fancy stuff with the enumerate. If you include a special package, use package enum item. Then within our enumerate, we can actually specify some stuff like label equals alpha. And so what this means is, hey, we have an enumeration, a 1, 2, 3 sort of list going on here. But how do we want to label it? Do we want to label it 1, 2, 3? Or do we want to label it using the alphabet, like this? If I wanted to be the capital alphabet, I could do like that. And you'll see it's going to be A, B, C. And furthermore, if I want a period after it, I can do that, and it shows up like this. Or I can do a parentheses like that, and it'll show up like this. So this package gives us a lot of versatility with how we display our lists. And you can also do like Roman numerals if you wanted to. See? And then same thing, capital for the big boy Roman numerals. Okay? So those are lists. And this is kind of like an advanced topic, but if we're making something like a textbook or a study guide where we want images on one side and text on the other, right, side by side, we can't do it like this because here the image takes up the whole space. We want it to be side by side. In other words, we want to split our page into 2 smaller pages, one here that has the image and one here that has the text. And so that's what we're literally going to do. We are going to make a mini page. So let me begin mini page. And I need to specify how big it is. So I can do like 0.475 text width. So basically I'm saying this is a bit smaller than half the page, and end mini page. So now I just created a tiny page, a mini page that has half the size of the big boy page. And I can just move anything I want there like this. And what we'll see is we're taking this image and now we put it, oops, let me go down to images. We put it within, right? We see there's like, it's now on the left side of the page. And if I wanted text on the right, I could do that. I could do right afterwards a begin mini page that has 0.5 text width. And I'm going to say here, let's make a buds list. So it's going to be buds, and we're going to do begin enumerate afterwards. Actually, itemize. I'm going to make it a bullet point list where we have things like Usao and Usako. Basically, all of the different fields that my channel covers. And we could keep on going. And basically, what we see is, hey, we got the image on this side and we got the text on this side. It's half and half. And so oftentimes, this is like if you need paragraphs of text alongside an image. And we can control the spacings however we want. For example, if I want to make the image bigger, instead of doing 0.5 text width, I can just make it the whole text width. And now it takes up the entirety of this mini page, right? It takes up the whole space here. And so, yeah, I think that's essentially everything you need to know about LaTeX. If you have any questions, put in the comment section below and I'll try and answer them. Finally, if you have no clue how to do something, for example, in math, if you want to do an integral, you can literally just search up how to make a integral in LaTeX. And it's going to show you the command right here. It may be difficult for you to understand at first, in which case you can ask me for help. But basically, let me just include this on my page. And here, I'm going to do, we're going to have big boy integral in the center, where integral from 0 to n of the fraction 2 to the n divided by, I guess 2 to the x divided by x dx. And so there's a couple of things I've got going on here. First of all, OMG, look at how nice that looks. But in reality, let's look here. Integral, that's what I just copy and pasted. It gave us this fancy integral symbol. Afterwards, I include a fraction. So how you do a fraction is you want to do \frac. And so this makes a fraction with the first brackets. This is your numerator. And then the second part is your denominator. As you can see here. And I spelled that incorrectly, but no one cares. Second, I put the dx here, but technically the d is not supposed to be italicized. So once again, I can put that in text like this. And so here we have a nice integral that looks like that. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some math stuff. So if you're not using LaTeX specifically for math, feel free to skip this section. First of all, when we use math, we want to include some packages that make our life easier. So I'm going to use package, and then all of them are ASMR. So we're going to do, no, AMSR. So AMS math, that basically formats our math so it looks nice. Use package AMS sim, which makes us be able to use a bunch of new math symbols. And AMS theme allows us to do some magic with theorems and such. So speaking of theorems, if you want to use any theorems or corollaries or lemmas in your document, if you're like writing a proof or something, you want to first define the new theorem. So basically, what this command does is it allows you to basically create a function of your own. So now you can use this wherever you want in your document to do the thing. So basically, new theorem, this first box here, we're going to put the name that we want to call it by, like the name of our function. And here is what it's going to display. And then in brackets, we can put the reset, when to reset our counter. So what does this mean? Let's do it with an example. So what if I wanted a function called theorem, where whenever I called it, I could make a new theorem. And of course, I would want it to say theorem when I use it. So I'm going to put theorem there. And I want to reset it after every section. So like if section 1 was about a certain, I don't know, whatever, I would want in section 1 for it to go like theorem 1, theorem 2. And then in section 2, I wanted to say again theorem 1, theorem 2. I wanted it to be reset, so that's why I put this section value here. If I didn't, then it would just go like theorem 1, theorem 2, theorem 3, theorem 4, and so on and so forth. So sometimes you might want this command here to help separate all of your math stuff. And I'm also going to make corollaries. So corollary, I don't know if I spelled that. And the name is going to be corollary. And I want to reset it after every theorem, because each theorem should have its own set of corollaries, right? Whenever we make a new theorem, it deserves its own set of new corollaries. And actually for our lemma, let's do something interesting. So we want to call it lemma, and of course we wanted to display lemma. But instead of resetting after some value, what if we wanted it to be numbered alongside a value? For example, if I had 2 theorems and a lemma, it would be like theorem 1, theorem 2. And what if we wanted to say lemma 3? Like continue the numbering so that theorems and lemmas are numbered using the same system. In that case, instead of putting reset at the end, I would put it in between right here. And I would call it lemma theorem. Okay, and let's put these new tools to use. So let's go to our introduction because it's looking kind of empty, and I can add some stuff here. So if I want to start a new theorem, well, I'm going to use begin, right? Whenever we want to start something, use begin and use end. So begin theorem, boom. And now I have this. And so what I can do with my new theorem is I can just put whatever it is inside this block here. So if my theorem is something simple like 2 plus 2 equals 4, then we can see that, hey, we have it, theorem 1.1, because it's the first theorem in section 1. And there we have our theorem. If you want something more fancy, like theorems are really cool, then boom, we have it there. And if we were to make a second theorem, begin theorem, and this theorem is that this tutorial is super helpful, then it's going to say theorem 1.2. And now, if I create a theorem in section 2, begin theorem, theorems in new sections, reset numbering, then we can see it's going to say 2.1, because now we're in section 2, it restarts our numbering. And the same thing applies to corollaries or lemmas. So I could add begin corollary. And I could do the same thing as before. Begin corollary. Blah, blah, blah. And so we see corollary 1.1.1, 1.1.2, because these are corollaries of theorem 1.1. Now, this is really nice because it allows us to say, like, hey, if we have something important, we can just put it here, here, here. But what if we want to reference that thing later on? What's an easy way to reference all these theorems and corollaries? So to do that, I'm actually going to, let's use a lemma. Let's say we want to reference a lemma. And the lemma for theorems is really cool, is that you should use theorems. Okay, and let's say we want to reference this lemma later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this lemma a special name, a label. And so the label I'm going to say is Sama. This is Sama's lemma. So basically, whenever I want to refer to this lemma later on, I can just use this special name that I've given it. So let's say later in math, I want to reference that lemma. I can just ref Sama, the name of the lemma, the label we assign to it. And now it's going to say, so I could say, according to same as lemma, this is really cool. And so now in our text, it's going to say according to 1.1.1, and when we click on it, it brings us to that lemma. So you could say according to lemma, blah, 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 and go back down there. When you click on it, it takes us right to it. So this is really nice if you have long like proofs or other complicated math documents where you have a ton of theorems and lemmas that you need to reference throughout. So main thing is, first of all, include your packages, your AMSR packages, then define your theorems and stuff, and finally, you just use them. And when you use them, you can give it a label, which is a name that you can reference later on in your code. Now, this is really cool, but it doesn't just apply to theorems. We can do the same thing with functions. So if I want to begin a equation, and I have an equation like 2.2 plus 2 equals 4. Now, in here, it's going to go into money mode. And so it's going to treat it as though we put double dollar signs in here when we do the begin equation. As we can see here, that's exactly what we have. We have this thing here and that. So, like, let's take our integral over here. And let's do begin equation and just slap that integral in there. And so now, look, our first equation is automatically labeled as equation 1, and our second is labeled as equation 2. What if we don't want a label? Well, we can do same thing, except instead of equation, we do equation star. And now when we do that, no more money signs. We see we have the equation as before. However, there isn't that number there. And equations function the same as theorems. If we want to reference it, we could give it a label in here. So label, I'm going to call this 1, just equation 1. It's not really clever. And I can call this label integral, and so on and so forth. So if I want to reference this, I could say according using equation, and then I'm going to reference the integral. We can see that this question is difficult. And when we do that, now, again, it automatically plugs in the number here. So that's the really cool thing about references is if we were to add another equation later on, so let's say I put another equation in between these two, and that equation is 5 factorial equals 120. Now, equation 2 isn't our integral, it's over here. But that's no problem, because it's based on the reference. So here, it says equation 3, because that's what it is now. If we were to get rid of both of these equations, it would update automatically. So it would say using equation 1, because now that's equation 1. And again, when we click it, it takes us instantly there. So this is a useful tool if you're writing like really big papers with lots of equations, lots of theorems, stuff like that. I hope this makes sense.